Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, it's Jory Rose. Before jumping into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that this episode will be the last of the season, as I'm going to be taking a hiatus during the summer. I have some incredible interviews lined up, and I cannot wait to share them come live in September. In the meantime, I will be sharing some of my favorite episodes, some that I've gotten incredible feedback on. So be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jory Rose so you can see which ones I am highlighting each week. And if you were interested in doing any one-on-one work with me, you can look at the link in my bio and my Instagram account, or go to my website, joryrose.com, as I am opening up the door for one-on-one coaching. This has been a new offering that I have for personalized intensives to really support your journey forward. And if this is something you're seeking, in which you have done therapy, you've maybe done all the things. You've done the therapy, you've done the yoga, you've done the meditation, perhaps you've done some deeper self-healing work, and you're not quite where you'd like to be in creating the change that you're seeking. I can support you on that and would love to connect with you. So thank you so much for being part of the Journey Forward community. If these episodes have been impactful to you, a rating, a review, a share would be much appreciated, so we can get the word out there to journey forward to those who are seeking inspiration, motivation, and tools to live their best, most authentic and fulfilling life. Enjoy today's episode, and I will see you back in September. Be well. Hey everyone, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I've got today Nellie Harden on with me, who is gonna help all you mamas out there of daughters understand the journey in a little bit more of what I think is going to be an aware and connected way. So Nellie, thank you so much for coming on. I know we've tried a couple of times to get this interview underway, and I'm so grateful to have you here today. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us, how did you get to where you are? What's been your journey?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. First of all, it's just it's a pleasure and humble just to talk with you. And yeah, so that's a really big question. I think when I'm in my 40s and I look back and I'm like, oh, I completely understand where everything has come from and how everything has been placed in order to get me where I am today. And you really are built out of everything that's come before you. And so my story and how I came to do what I do today really started early on. I lost my dad when I was super, super young. I was only about 9 months old when he was in an accident. And so then it was just my mom and I. And then when I was 8, she was remarried and she had a brother. Well, she had 2 more kids, my brother and sister. And but with all of that uncertainty and kind of turmoil in some parts of childhood, right, that then became certainty later on, it led to some just interesting growth, growing up in stages. And so when I left home, no fault of my mom. She didn't know. Most of us that grew up in the 80s and 90s didn't know, but those certain steps of growing your worth and growing your esteem and growing your confidence as a young woman really were not put in place. And so then when I went off to college at 17, because I went off early and I was 7 hours away from home, I was just chasing worth anywhere that I could find it. And, whether that be academics or it be, social, or it be boys or whatever that was. And it really led down some really dark paths for me that then took decades to heal from. And to be quite honest, some of those journeys are just going to be a lifelong healing journey.
Absolutely.
And so I've been on that side of it as experiencing it. And then we had 4 daughters in 4 years.
Wow. Busy mama over there.
Yeah, it was an kind of insane time, but we had all these daughters and we went through a lot of life's struggles and mishaps with my husband's health, and we almost lost him. And my background has always been in biology and psychology. I love the combination and the play between those two, because the biology being the, gross anatomy, the structure and what's actually physically happening, but then the psychology and how does that manifest in behaviors and decisions and core beliefs and values and what we do with our lives, right? And so I love the play on both of those, but I actually started my career in marine mammalogy. And so I was, out studying whales and different mammals. But then I had to retire from that because my husband is a 9-to-5er computer guy. And I was like out on, I was like, oh, I need to be out on the high seas, and I was like, wait a second, this isn't very compatible, it was good. And it was great. And we decided that I would come home, but then he got sick, and then we had all these kids, and that was after 3 years of infertility as well. And so it was a lot to take in during our 20s and 30s.
Sure.
But when we did have all of these daughters, and we were also faced with them possibly, living life without their dad, I just came to really understand the limited impact that we have as parents. It seems so long, but it's only 6,570 days, give or take. That's how many days are in 18 years. And yes, of course, we're still parents later on. I mean, you were saying you have a 20-year-old. Yes, of course, you are still her parent, right? But that impact time is different before and during the 65-70 versus after. And
Absolutely.
so then I was looking at these 4 little girls going, okay, before they leave home, I really want to solidify in them this foundation of their worth and their esteem and their confidence, so that they can go off into the world and do whatever they're uniquely designed to do. And I'm like, grades are certainly important, and my kids have great grades. But I was talking to someone last week, and I was like, well, what good is an A in calculus if they're really failing at just being alive and being a human and feeling worthy, right? So we have some things backwards, especially in the Western, part of the world. And it really does come down to that. If we can give them that foundation to stand on, jump from, grow from, and everything, then everything else can fall into place. So that's kind of where it's all come from.
In a nutshell, that's been your journey. I love it. And thank you for sharing so many aspects of it. And, coming from, and I have some similar parallels, not exactly, but I also grew up really without a dad. And, when we don't always have a balance in our childhood parenting, it can leave some holes, right? And so I understand what that feels like, even just being very quick with my mom. And yet there was so much trauma in my family that she wasn't prepared. So how could she give it to me? Right. Yes. And of course, and as you said, that generation didn't think like that, didn't do that. That wasn't the consciousness of parenting 45, 50 years ago. We're both in our 40s. And so growing up at that exact same time, that wasn't the consciousness of parenting. So like you said, no fault to them. And yet now we know how to parent in a more aware, conscious, intentional way, understanding, wow, what can we influence? And I love the words that you keep saying. And the worth, esteem, and confidence. And, you're also fighting patriarchy as wanting to teach your girls this, right? So it's not just what you can teach in your home and instill in their own value set, but it's also a greater consciousness of the whole world around you may not necessarily support this or value this. And that's quite the feat you've taken on. And I really love the commitment to it. So how have you done that with your daughters? What does that look like for you personally? And then how have you made that into the career that you have?
Well, like everything in my life, it has started from within and then started growing outward. We have a family business even where we custom etch glass straws for people in order to cut down on plastic waste in the world, right? But we did that because we did it as a family first. We're like, oh, that works. And then we did it outside. Same with the 6570 Family Project. We did the work within us. And then I was just called, for lack of anything better, to then spread that out in the world too. And it really is, if you can look at it, I'm such a picture person in my head. And so if you can look at it as a 3-tiered foundation, and that bottom piece, second half of childhood, first half of childhood is very different than second half of childhood. And
what ages would you put on that first and second half? Because I could identify.
Yeah, I would split it down, like, birth to 8 and 8 to 18 or so, but every kid is different. So
sure.
I was just reading a study last summer, and it just blew my mind, because they were saying that if you take the actual mindset and actions of what adolescence has looked like over the past 500 years,
wow.
500 years ago, it was like, here's your 2 weeks of adolescence, go off in the forest and come back a man or a woman, right? And then it was, especially for a woman, it was like, oh, you have your cycle, there you go, you're a woman now, right? And they had to change. They felt like they had to change overnight. Now we know that that isn't the case brain development wise, right? But if you even just look like Little House on the Prairie times, like 100, maybe 130 years ago, it was 14 to 16, right? Was this time period of this growth of adolescence. You really were a child until you were like 12 to 14, and then you went off and did whatever you needed to do. You came back at 16, you were an adult. And today, if you look at it, and those same actions and mindsets, the ages are 6 to 32 on average.
Wow.
What? I know, right? 6 to 32. And then just yesterday, there was a great new article.
Let me ask on that really quick. Is that defining the changes in the brain? What is that time period? Is that roles we're adopting, or launching practices, like kind of going out into the community? Is that what that 6 to 32 is defining?
Yes, absolutely. So technology has been a huge part of it, right? And so it is, what are our kids being exposed to earlier on, right? Even if you don't have a phone for your kid, or a device, or what have you, an iPad, other people do, and they are going to see some of those things. And I'm not saying throw in the towel and just get them an iPad when they're 2. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that as a parent, we do need to be aware that they are having access to these things, even if you don't give them direct access to them. Right. I mean, even through school computers and all of these things, those discussions that might have been put off until they were 14 to 16 years old are happening so much sooner. The pressures, the questions that they're getting, right? We have so much sexual pressure today on our kids, starting in elementary school, early elementary school sometimes, right? I mean, I work with a lot of parents with young women, and raising 4 of my own, there's stories like a 7th grade dance, right? And maybe a group of girls is getting together to get ready at a house and go to the 7th grade dance. And this one young woman was asked by an 8th grade boy, like, oh, well, who's your date for the dance? She's like, oh, we're just getting together with a bunch of friends, and we're going over there. And he's like, oh, well, then you must be gay and a lesbian. And she's like, what? But these are the type of things that are being pressured and being questioned and being asked. And then they feel like they need to require answers at such an early age, where this would not have been the case before, right? So that's just one example, because that happens to be one of the biggest cultural currents going on right now. Right. But it happens with a lot of different things, with smoking, or, marijuana, or using the, and I'm totally missing the word. What are the cartridges?
Vape pen.
The vaping. Thank you. The vaping and things like that. So it happens with a lot of things. But yeah, 6 to 32. And when I tell people about this, and I've talked about it over the last year, you really start to think about, not mine, but, a cousin that you have that's 27, or maybe a sibling you have that's 32. And you're like, you know what? I can kind of see that they haven't taken those next steps in order to grow into adulthood yet. and maybe they don't know how, right?
And there's so much there. As a therapist, I have seen, plenty of people I've worked with that kind of have that failure to launch children.
Yes.
And my partner, he's a psychologist and he works mostly with men. And he sees, especially in young men, this failure to launch because there's so much comforts of home. Technology allows them to not have to risk being rejected by a woman. They
Yeah.
can get their needs met for sex. They don't really need to make money if their parents are supporting them. They don't have the social skills. Like, we are thwarting so much development and human interaction. Why should anyone leave the house to some extent if and parents are too afraid to push
Yeah.
for fear that it
100%.
might, make your kid mad at you, or, mental health is so fragile. I don't want to risk anything. And so then it's almost an epidemic of some sorts. I've read studies in which marriage quality men have declined. So women, of marriage age, let's say mid 20s to 30s, they're rising above men in college attendance, and these failure to launch young men. So these women aren't having quality men as potential partners.
I 100% see that. Absolutely. And when we're looking at that too, as far as launching and going out in the world, and the mental health is such a sticky subject today. And especially since we had the pandemic, there's a lot of parents that are like, well, the pandemic took, 2-3 years to get through. Therefore, their adolescence is being elongated 2 to 3 years in order to make up for it. I've seen a lot of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have definitely seen too, where parents are so afraid of their kids today.
Yes.
And in some ways, rightfully so, because of my kid, not my kid, but, a kid told on a teacher that mom yelled at me yesterday for this. And now the mom is in there and getting in trouble for this. And so parents don't feel in some ways that they can parent the way that they want to or need to in some
or
instances.
used to. Yeah.
Or definitely used to. I mean, I remember growing up, I would get the belt. I would get the paddle. Today, I feel like that would be unheard of in many instances because the parents would get in trouble, right?
Yeah.
And then you have kids threatening parents all the time. I'm going to call, DCS or whatever is in your state. I'm going to divorce you, right? Emancipation. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to hurt myself, right? Some of that has been really fed through media. We look on Netflix, for example, on Netflix, and there's a lot of movies out there that I'm not going to pretend to know what the director had in mind with this, but when my kids watch it, it definitely glorifies things like suicide and the attention that you can get for attempting it, or even after doing it. And all these people show up for, the funeral. And then you're remembered in all these ways, even from people that you weren't friends with, but now they are friends with you, but you're gone. And so we've had to have a lot of these really hard conversations with my kids. And it's just been difficult. It is difficult to raise teenagers today and get them ready to launch, to go into the world. You have to get through this really, really sticky part of teenager and then get them ready for the world as well. And it's tumultuous. And so this foundation of worth and esteem, which is value and appreciation for yourself, and helping you find that in others. And then confidence, true belief in yourself, is really this 3-tiered. So I just want to talk about worth for a second, because worth is, you can't have value and appreciation for yourself if you don't see yourself worthy. You cannot believe in yourself if you don't find yourself worthy. Right. And so it really is this bottleneck right here. And there's 5 distinct pillars of self-worth that everyone has. You have them, I have them, everyone does. But in adolescence, when their brain, that frontal lobe, is all live wired, right? It doesn't have the insulation with it's called the myelin sheath, right? It doesn't have that insulation. So all these nerves are laying tracks up there as to what is going to be their thinking process later on. And so these needs that are in the worth stage are electrified. They are amplified. And so that is, they need to know that they are seen and heard and loved, that they belong somewhere, and that they have a purpose. And when I look at every issue that I am seeing around in adolescents and tweens and teens and preteens, everything today, it all boils down to one or more of those: seen, heard, love, belong, purpose. And so if we can help them find that within themselves, and then help them find that out in the world, different places they can find that out in the world. But at first it needs to be intrinsic, because if they're just seeking it out in the world, they will find it in a million unhealthy ways.
Absolutely.
So it needs to be intrinsic first, and helping them do that at home with simple things like when they walk in a room, look up, look them in the eye, say their name. Hey, how are you today? Oh, how did that test go? Right? Like just giving them a platform that they can speak on so they can be heard.
These simple points of connection seem so simple, and yet they're so, so powerful. So many parents, I do a lot of mindful parenting work in my practice, and it's one of the parts of my practice I get most passionate about, because I get a lot of parents who ask me, oh, could you work with my kid? They've got this, or this. Could you see my kid? And I did work with kids for many years until I realized I'd actually rather work with the parents, because that actually is the ability to create the whole shift in culture in the home. And oftentimes the parents don't even have the awareness to slow down, to remember to look up and ask the question and pay attention, right? So the parents has to start with their own intrinsic intention to be able to do that, because if they weren't raised with it, right, shit rolls downhill. So you're going to just get that same pattern. And I used, maybe you'll appreciate this, when my kids were younger, and I'm one of those moms, Nellie, I never once had a carpool. I took my kids every day, just me. It was an honor and a privilege to have the ability and freedom to do so, but it was always those points of connection. I didn't want to miss out on those points of connection. Those were really valuable times for me. And when my kids got their license, I kind of mourned that time a little bit, up until I realized how much easier it made my life. But there was definitely a lot of mourning happening. But I used to play this game with myself, that when I would pick them up from school, I would ask myself, do I remember what they were wearing this morning? Because if I did, that meant I was present and aware enough to truly have made that eye contact, that connection. And I'll be honest, some days I'm like, shit, I don't remember what they wore. But it's just, it wasn't about putting judgment on myself. It was just simply a reminder to be present.
Yeah.
And if I could be present, like you just said, with that, then their belief system is, I'm worthy of someone being present for me.
Absolutely. I know for me, I have an 18-year-old. She's a senior. She's her last day of school is just in 2 days. And but when she gets up in the morning to go to school, she's the earliest. And then I have 3 others that are in a different school that we drive to. But my 18-year-old is obviously driving, but I don't have to get up early enough to see her by any means. In fact, my husband's like snoozing and he's like, why do you get up? It's like, because she needs to know that someone cares enough to get up to just say, bye, have a good day. Right. So I get up, I do my workout. She always comes up when I'm doing my workout and, hey, how are you? Oh, you look cute. Oh, what's going on today? Awesome. Okay. Well, have a good day. Drive safe. Right. And she knows that I get up early enough to just have that 30-second sometimes interaction with her, but it's important. It's important to me. It's important to her. I know she appreciates it. And it starts her day off with knowing I'm worthy enough that someone got up just to say hello to me in the morning,
Yeah. It's funny you say that. That was one of the things that I was like, oh, if I'm not getting up super early to drive to school, I could sleep in a little bit longer. And I've done a little bit of that. And recently my 17-year-old, she's a junior. And, my kids have been making their lunches for years. And I really value the ability to take care of themselves and know how to do all the things. But there's this little balance. And towards the end of the school year, she's actually said, hey, Mom, will you come downstairs and make me lunch? Aww. And part of me is like, oh, man, like you leave kind of early. The other part of me is like, she's asking me for this point of connection.
Yeah.
And she's actually going to be graduating high school early. So she is also done next week, but she will be finishing up the semester early. So it's like, this is really time limited connection and opportunity. And do I really want to make lunch? I'm kind of tired of making lunch. I'm going to be honest. Like I'm kind of over it. I'm kind of even making dinners a little bit, but you know, to be asked still feels like a privilege, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And even just the small things, you know, one of my daughters who's 15, she came in and she asked me the other day, she's like, "Can I use your charger from my computer?" And I was like, "Sure, absolutely, but thanks for asking." Like, of course I was going to let her do it, but just the fact that she asked was just so nice, right? And then it's a point of asking permission, giving permission, and it's practicing that muscle over and over again of generosity and, you know, and asking permission. And we get to do that over and over again. Now, does it always happen? Goodness, no, you know, goodness, no. I do live in a house with 4 teenage girls, and sometimes it is absolutely crazy. And the fact that they're all within 4 years of each other, there's, you know, bickering that happens, but there's also these beautiful sister nights that they have every week. And there's these beautiful sister days that they go on, and they just go thrifting and, you know, eating somewhere in town and just having fun. And they really do help one another and rely on one another and steal each other's clothes. And then we have a lot of family time too. And so it's been a beautiful give and take. But one of the things that has really helped, especially with that worthiness and then value and appreciation too, especially, is serving. We do a lot of serving in our family. And so we serve within our church community, but we also just serve as our family, as the 6 of us serves together in different, whenever we travel, we always find a serving opportunity, and we serve as mentors, and we take care of, you know, people's babies, and we do that all together as a family. And we've been through some really hard walks with that, through people that have been making bad decisions and that have this generational pain that has gone on for 3, 4, 5 generations, right? And they're stuck in it now. And we're trying to help them be the elbow, right? Be the turn. And if we can show enough people love, then at least it will be a doorway to them to say, you know what, maybe I am worthy, even though I've made all of these mistakes and I've, you know, done all of these things. Maybe I am worthy because these people believe in me. And that has been such a gift to give my kids, because we've been able to have really hard discussions about really hard topics before they were ever a problem in our home.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, what that makes me think about is Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion. And one of the meditations that she does on self-compassion is the way that, because, you know, it's easy to have compassion for others. It's much harder to have compassion for ourselves. And the meditation that she guides in is, imagine a time in which you helped somebody and how it must have made the other person feel, and how you felt in that moment helping others. And the reminder that that person was worthy of receiving support, even if they asked for it, right? That you were still able to give it, and how good you felt in giving it. And then she flips the script and say, imagine a time in which someone helped you and how it felt for you to receive it, even if you asked, right? It didn't have to just be, you know, without being asked, but the reminder that you are worthy of receiving it. And we so often are like, oh, I can give it, but it's harder to receive. So to actually meditate on those experiences as an indicator of worthiness, it's a beautiful practice.
Yeah. I 100% agree. I call those anchor events. So I really, with my clients and community, I encourage them to find those anchor events, especially with joy, right? Because no one is going to have a whole day that is completely joyous at every turn, right? But we have these moments. And if we can have these anchor moments that even through hard times, we can go back and we can be like, no, I remember what joy feels like because of that moment. I was joyous in that moment. I remember what it feels like, and I can get back there. I know it's still within me.
And harness it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like happiness comes and goes with, literally the waves or the wind, but joy is always within, but sometimes we need to remind ourselves of those. And so, yeah, I use those anchor moments for those.
Yeah, one of the things, I was just at a conference, and it was a mindfulness conference, and I was doing a relational mindfulness practice being guided by this woman who's going to be on the podcast as well. And part of it was remembering within the past 24 hours a moment of gratitude or awe.
Mm.
And she explained the science behind gratitude and awe. Positive psychology would just kind of assume all positive emotions are the things to be able to help interconnect us and build that foundation. But some newer research is coming out more specifically around gratitude and awe, because it is expansive and it connects us to others. The happiness can sometimes be internal and not be a point of connection to others. So interesting, we're talking about being in service and having this interconnectivity, to also look for those positive emotion and positive experiences that bind us together to help us realize I'm worthy of being connected. I'm not alone. Part of that being seen, heard, and validated that you named earlier.
Absolutely. And it comes back to what we were talking about before with even our upbringings. And when we are able to serve, able to connect with other people, we can see so many people are actually really doing the best they can with what they have. Even if you were just to take a snapshot of their life, you would say, oh, if there were two piles, good and bad, you would put them in the bad pile, right? But they really are doing the best they can with what they were equipped with in their life. And so that's a great perspective that then we can also bring into our families as a parent, especially, because it's really easy as a parent to look at your kid and be like, why are you doing that? Why are you making that decision? Especially when they're teenagers, right? I don't understand. Well, frankly, number one, you won't. You are a different developmental species than they are right now.
Yep.
Their brains are different than you are. They literally cannot think the same way that you do as a parent. So that's always number one for me. You are a different developmental species. It's up to you as a parent to love and lead them to a place that they learn how to love and lead themselves. And to do that, we need to understand them both biologically, psychologically, faith, culture, all of the things, right? And so it's really up to us to lead that path. But if we can understand they're doing the very best they can with what they have, and they can see that, and you can have those real conversations, it really opens up doors and breaks down walls.
It really, really does. I want to say one more piece about the service part, because this was a fascinating experience I had with my younger daughter. And then I want to go on to how do we build confidence. But my daughter, when she was 13, we went to Ecuador and did a service trip to support a small village. And this was part of her mitzvah project for her bat mitzvah, of being involved in giving back. And part of her mindset at the time was, I want to help others, partly because she had experienced depression. And she knew that would help lift her mental health by being in service to others. But it was also this amazing experience and perspective she had. She had this assumption of being in this third world village, which it was very, very rustic of where we were. We were literally in the middle of the Amazon, no Wi-Fi, no cell service, no nothing. And she realized they have nothing, and they were the happiest people she'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And being in service took her out of her place of privilege to have her to connect to what's really important, right? Because I think this is one of the distractions of our teenagers. You mentioned technology earlier. Interestingly enough, somehow some of these teenagers in this little Quichua village in the middle of Ecuador had gotten an old cell phone and were pretending to take selfies. I'm like, okay, so kids are kids no matter where they are in the world. I don't know how they know how to do this. They don't, have Netflix or YouTube or TikTok to get insight on. But the universality of the humanity is one thing, but to recognize, our privilege doesn't necessarily make us happy people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for kids in many parts of where we live in our Western culture, that's a really important aspect to stay grounded.
Yes. I 100%.
And so being in service really gives that opportunity to also say, another thing, my daughter, the same one, just spent a semester abroad last semester. She was in Israel, and went to Poland for a week and they spent, time in the concentration camps.
Oh.
And it humbled her so much. And she spent an entire day at Auschwitz and she said, Mom, I have no right to ever complain again. And she was there in the middle of winter and it was 18 degrees outside and she was in 3 pairs of socks and heavy coats and hats and scarves and she was still freezing. And so just also like being in service puts us outside of our comfort zone to have us have more gratitude, experience more awe, appreciation, value what we have so that we don't minimize it, dismiss it, take it for granted, get stuck in, I keep using the word privilege. And I know that's not always the case. We can not have privilege and still get stuck in these things, but being in service is such a powerful piece. I really commend that is such a core value of what you're teaching in the 6570 family project, but also within your own family.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I mean, there's just something so beautiful too, that lights a charge in them to see something that they could do something about. Even they aren't going to be able to solve the whole problem, but they could be a piece of a solution to something. And it just ignites a flame in them that not only am I worthy myself, but they are worthy and I'm worthy to help them, right?
Yes.
I am worthy to help them.
So moving on to some of the pillars, confidence. It's such a tricky thing when we are in constant comparison mind,
right?
Especially as teenagers. Social media is going to get stuck in the way of, perhaps giving ourselves the actual, I would say appropriate, I don't know if that's the right word, but appropriate confidence, right? For the right reasons. So what are some of the ways that you build and give a foundation of confidence in your girls and in the clients and families you work with?
Well, I think the biggest thing with confidence is learning to trust yourself. In order to believe in yourself, you have to trust yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And so then setting up actual logistical plans that you can build confidence with. And, so many times you go out there and you hear all the, the more clouded version, the more ambiguous version of, oh, do this, walk into a room and feel powerful. And well, okay, that's all great, but actually, how do I do it?
Sounds lovely, but what does that actually mean in practice?
Right. Like, what do I do right now? And so I really recommend and I help people develop routines in order to stay on task. And I always tell people to, it sounds funny, but be beef jerky. And what I mean by that, coming from this 26-year veteran of vegetarianism here, what I mean is that, beef jerky is structured and it's stiff, but it's also flexible, right? So you're going to have some routines, but then you're going to have some flexibility in there. And that really comes with time. Time is something that slips by so many people today, especially because of technology. You get on technology and you're like, where did the last 3.5 hours go? I mean, the craziest things you will find your kids watching. I saw the other day, there was this video that was no joke. It was like 45 minutes long of someone doing surgery on a tomato in order to get out a foreign object because they pretend that vegetables are humans with ailments and they do surgery on them. And I'm just like, I don't even know where to process that in my head, And so, but my point is they will sit there and watch this thing and 45 minutes are gone. And then they don't feel like they can trust themselves. They feel behind. They feel like they, maybe the test that they have the next day, they don't do well on because they didn't have time to study because they were immersed in these things. So those type of things, definitely. And then the next thing I really, not require, but I really teach is an EMP tool. So it's an emotional, mental, and physical tool. And what we do is we go through and say, okay, where do you want to be? Who are you becoming? So many people are like, oh, I'm going to go discover myself, or I need to get to know myself. Well, yes, your habits and understanding your habits and how you work, but also your identity is not out there in a field of daisies and you go pick one, right? It is who you are building into becoming. You are in the driver's seat of that. And so helping them understand, okay, who are you trying to become now? If that's who that is, what are 3 things that you can do today that will align you with that and get you moving in that direction? Okay.
Yes, every action is a step toward the person you want to be. It's like James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. It's all that,
Yes.
what are you doing to align? Because you could say you want to be this person, but are you aligning yourself in the way that would support that?
100%. And I mean, it goes back to like what I was saying with worth. It's just the simple things. So if I want to, in my ideal world, which I do, have a healthy, thriving marriage, right? Then I know that I want to go on at least 2 dates a week with my husband, and we make it happen. And that's just my husband and I, because we are in the throes of everything crazy right now, raising 4 daughters between 13 and 18, right? There's a lot of moving parts everywhere, but we just move everything out of the way and we plop ourselves down. We find time to have a date with the 2 of us, because we know also in 5 years, it's going to be the 2 of us. And we don't want to get there and then be like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. I'm the mother of your children.
I haven't seen you for 20 years.
Yeah. And so, that's just an example there, so we have 3 things under there: go on 2 dates a week. We want to get away once a year for just a couple of days. Like that's all that we do. And then we also want to we have breakfast every morning together. And so those are just 3 things that we can do right now, and planning and getting into the habit of, in order to move ourselves toward that goal. So
and I love, and if I could interject too, what I love about that is it also teaches your daughters the value of partnership and relationship, because I see so often parents giving everything to their kids, and it makes their kids feel that they are the most important thing in the world, which of course our kids are the most important thing, but we also our lives outside of mothers, and to be able to role model that value set is so beautiful. And I mean, all my clients I work with, I talk about having just a weekly check-in just for 30 minutes with your partner. And most people don't even have that. And it's not a judgment. It's, we aren't creating time for it.
Yeah.
And my partner and I, we don't live together yet. We've been together many years, but we're both divorced and kind of waiting for our kids to launch. And, we broke up for a while and we're back together. And part of this is really dedicating time together. And so we sit every week, look at our calendar. And lately what's been most easy is, morning coffee date, and taking, whose house are we going to? And are there plenty of other things I could be doing on a Monday morning? Yes. Is that my priority? Yes. Right. It's just dedicating time and attention to what you value. So whether we're role modeling that to our kids or helping them understand, what do I want to value? What's important to me? It's most parents don't have this awareness to even have these conversations.
And we also have to think about too, what kind of relationship do you want your child to have in the future? And I can't tell you how many times people come over to our house and they, like whisper to one of my kids, like, your parents are like being weird. They're like laughing or, giggling, or they're sitting by each other on the couch. What? Like, that's so weird. Right. But then when I think about the future relationships I want my daughters to have, I want them to be close with, their spouses later on. I want them to have that freedom and to feel loved and worthy and in the relationship, and to build a strong family. And if they don't see it now, it's going to be so much harder later on, because 100%. Then they're going to have to chisel away at the foundation that was made for them in the 65, 70, because no matter what, a foundation is made. It's just, how are you making that foundation? What is that foundation going to be made of? Right.
Right.
And so many of us that are adults now and parents, we have a foundation, but we've had to look back and change some things because they just weren't working. And it wasn't what we needed in order to have the success in our lives, of however we define success in our lives. Everyone has a different definition of that, right?
Absolutely.
And it's so much harder to take the chisel to that foundation as an adult and change things. And your knee-jerk reactions, those reflexes, are always going to go back to what it was. And then you're like, no, wait, I changed that one and I got to go back. So it's so much
do
harder.
that reprogramming, that rewiring, that inner child healing. It's possible.
Yes.
And it's a lot harder. Ellie,
Yes.
I feel like I could talk to you absolutely for hours. I feel like we just barely scratched the surface, but you gave so much foundation of what parents can do. So this 65 to 70 family project, as we begin to wrap up, just share exactly what that is, where people can find out more about it, how they can work with you, because I truly believe we can change the world just, one household at a time, as I know that you have in kind of your bio with that.
Yeah.
And it's so true. The ripple effect of what you're teaching is so far beyond your four daughters.
Oh, yeah.
And
And
that's the beauty of what your business that you've created, of how you live your life.
And it really is it's my mission field. It's my battlefield. It's everything for me in my life in order to do this, because I don't want more generations of young women going out and being released into the world, chasing their worth. I want young women to be launched because they have this foundation, right? And so, everything can be found on nellieharden.com. I like to keep it simple, because Lord knows that everything is complicated out there right now and within families. And so I like to keep it simple. You can find everything on there, including a complimentary masterclass that's called the Daughter Decoder. And so if you have a daughter in the second half of childhood, or will get to the second half of childhood eventually, right? If you have a daughter below the age of 6, 7 or so, then really go ahead and watch that. It gives you the who, what, where, why, when, and even some how of what this foundation is, the exact address that it needs to be built at, and how you can do that going forward.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for the beautiful work that you're doing. Your daughters are so lucky to have you. And for all the families that you work with, I mean, these are, like I said, the ripple effect of what this intentionality of how we're raising our girls is going to change the way that they show up in the next generation, the way that they parent, the way that they are in partnership, the way that they are in service to the world. And it's such a beautiful foundation that you're giving. So lovely talking with you. Like I said, I wish I could talk to you for another couple of hours. There's so many different aspects of this that are important, but I really appreciate your time today. And thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
All right, everyone. If this was meaningful to you, definitely check out Nellie's site and share this episode with anyone else who you think would benefit from hearing. You can give us a rating, a review, a share, because the intention is for all of us to be able to journey forward in happier, healthier, more connected and aligned ways. So take care and be well, everyone.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.